Hey guys, it is That's So Caden. I am joined by Ava Wilde, a trainee under Dustin Rhodes' first training academy. Make sure you guys check out our exclusive interview. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Unpopular Review Interviews. I am That's So Caden. I am joined today by a trainee of Dustin Rhodes, Ava Wilde. How are you doing today?
Hi, Kaden. I am doing pretty well today.
Well, let's get started with tell me how you got into wrestling in the first place, kind of how that all came to be, how you decided to be a professional wrestler.
I guess it's kind of like a little meet cute as to how I got introduced to the world of wrestling. Not shockingly, as you will find out the more you talk to me, I did not grow up watching wrestling. I basically had zero idea what it was, didn't know it was a thing. Up until even when I was in like college, somebody started calling me Triple H as like a funny joke. And I had no idea why. I was like, I don't understand. My name only has two H's in it. Where are you getting the third H from? And they were like the wrestler. And I was like, the who? The what? And so then I even met someone while I was living abroad who was on the independent circuit in Switzerland as a professional wrestler. And he showed me like all these photos of him doing matches. And I was like, this is different. You guys are doing very athletic things, but you also have a pink boa. I don't understand. So fast forward about another year, and I came home, and I ended up meeting the guy who is soon to be my husband. And he, lo and behold, did grow up watching all of the wrestling and all of the things. And so he continues to this day to be a big wrestling fan, watches it, all the things on YouTube. And it was one of those ones where I would always joke around with him. I was like, these girls, like, I bet I could do what these girls do.
Mhm.
And I would joke so much about it because I was just jealous that he was watching it. And he was like, well, if you actually started training, I bet you could. I was like, okay, well, when COVID had hit, I'd already exhausted kind of my career as a competitive power lifter. And then I dabbled in a little bit of bodybuilding, wasn't too enthralled with it. And then COVID hit, and I was like, shoot, I really need something new to try and get into. And so I actually ended up looking up and seeing if there were any wrestling schools around where I lived. And lo and behold, there was one about like 30 minutes away. The place that I initially started training at, my first wrestling home, which was AAPW in Central Austin. Started training there, was having a blast, good times, created Ava Wilde and who I am. Then heard through the grapevine that a Mr. Dustin Rhodes, which he even knows this, that I at the time had no idea who he was. He was opening up a school and ended up being a lot closer to my house too. So I was like, oh, that's cool. I might as well just apply, like just shoot my application and then try. And ended up getting a phone call from him, which was very cool because after I was like, who is this guy? My husband showed me all the YouTube videos about him, and I was like, wow, this guy's a big deal. This guy's really famous. And then when I got a phone call from him, I was like, oh, shoot, I'm talking to someone like big time. I'm talking to a real famous person right now. And I just thought it was very cool and professional of him to reach out individually to each student selected to apply and get in. He told me that he liked my look and that he would be very interested in me coming to his school. I started training with him, and it was an extremely incredible experience.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you did powerlifting and a little bit of bodybuilding before wrestling. How did that start? Was that something you started in high school, or was it college after?
So I'd always been trying to like do something athletic through from like middle school up. In college, I'd always known, I was like, I know I want to do a bodybuilding show one day, but obviously I'm not going to be like big enough yet. So I just kept strength training. And then when I met my husband, he was starting to train for like powerlifting. And so I started practicing the lifts with him and decided to do my first meet. And then we kind of got hooked onto that for a bit. We were in it for a couple years. I did several meets and ended up actually holding 4 state records for the state of Texas. And then we also became judges, and we were just really, really involved in it until it was like time to move on. I was like, okay, we've maxed out where we kind of want to go with this. So let me finally, I've put on a little bit more muscle. So now I'm going to try my hand at bodybuilding. I had a good time with it for the most part. It was a fun experience, but it's a lot different. The two sports are very, very different. A lot of dieting for bodybuilding, a lot of dieting and cardio that I wasn't in love with at the time. You can always appreciate like the amount of work that people put into maintaining and just being very consistent with a very strict, boring, bland diet when it comes to bodybuilding prepping. So then when I got out of that, I was like, we're gonna wait a while before we try that again.
So now you mentioned that you were part of the first academy at Dustin Rhodes Training Academy that he recently started.
First class, baby.
Congratulations.
Actually, I have my little
ring,
graduating class ring, and right there on the side it says, "Where's the camera? First class."
Oh,
whoop, whoop.
That's a nice ring.
I know, it was very classy. I was like,
Well, let's bring it back to the beginning of that. You talked about you submitting the application. What was the application process like?
It was a very standard like application of like, what's your name, email address, where do you live, what's kind of your athletic background, how old are you, what do you weigh, what's your height, weight, send a picture, and then kind of like give us a little bit more information about you. Why do you like wrestling? What got you into it? What kind of experience do you have with it? Because he does really want to open it up to all levels. And so that's in our first class, that's what we had. We had all levels of experience, from people who had been working on the circuit for maybe a little bit to people who'd been training for a couple of months, like me and a couple others. And then people who were like, I've never stepped foot inside of a ring. And the amount of progress that Dustin was able to make with some of the kids that had not even stepped foot in the ring ever, to in 12 weeks getting them to be able to put on a full-fledged like 10-minute match was amazing. It was so much fun to watch these like fellow students learn and develop their skill set over just honestly like 12 weeks. It sounds long, but it also sounds really short. Like it's a really short period of time if you think about it. It was just extremely impressive. And the other thing that was on the application itself, he wanted you to submit like a little video. And it was, the prompt was just like, tell us why we should admit you. And I sat there with my husband and I was like, this is interesting. I feel like this is one of the things that's gonna either like make or break the application. And so it ended up being, you could go one of two routes. You could either just talk and be like, hey, my name is this, I come from this, I like wrestling because of this. Or we also interpret it as cut a promo. And so I ended up actually like cutting a little 90-second promo video, which I still have, and I have no idea if I should ever like send it out. Where I just was like, you know, like I basically cut a promo on how I was like, you want the best of both worlds. Like you want strength and athleticism, but you also want like a girl, like a pretty girl. And so, that sounded really conceited. But I was like, you want to get the best of both worlds. And it was a little video where it like walked in on me doing curls. And it was so stupid. But obviously it stood out. So that was the goal, right?
So now let's talk a little bit about the training itself with Dustin. What was that like? When did you guys have classes? How long were they?
Trained about like 3 to 4 times a week, and they were 3 to 4 hours each. But I don't know, that sounds like kind of long when you just say it, but it just flew by. We had so much fun with him. He made learning such a fantastic experience. And it wasn't even just all the physical training. We learned so many things about the actual business itself, about how how it would be to be a different type of wrestler, like a TV wrestler versus an independent wrestler, how to manage your money. And we also had promo classes where it was a really cool one to see the progress, not only of people in the ring, but the people on the mic, because obviously there's some wrestlers that have, he calls it like the gift of gab, and they can just spit whatever they want and it sounds great on the mic. I am not one of those people. I have to think about it. I have to plan something. There were a lot of people that even just kind of got like, there's camera shy. Some people didn't know how to talk for more than 60 seconds. So it was really cool to learn and progress a bunch of different skill sets in that element as well.
So now, I know a lot of people like to say that you remind them a little bit in the ring of China, of course.
I don't have bangs down right now, but when I put my bangs down, yes, I get frequently the like, oh, you look like China. Thanks. I wish I could have a career like China.
I mean, so is there anything specifically, did you model that look after her, or was it just a coincidence?
It was honestly purely a coincidence. I had known, I guess that I had known about her, but I didn't think about it. It was COVID and everybody cut their bangs. It was like people were just getting bored, and so they were cutting their bangs. And I wanted something fresh. I had started doing my hair dark, and I was like, I bet I could pull off the bangs. The last time I'd had bangs was freshman year of high school. And I cut them, and then I also started getting into the wrestling thing. And they were like, oh, it looks like this. And I was like, oh, shoot. I didn't mean to steal her thing. Like, that wasn't my goal. So...
Speaking of inspirations, was there anything specifically that you had watched in wrestling that did inspire you in ring, or was it all taken from Dustin's training itself?
One of the questions Dustin asked us day one of class was, what does it mean to like be a wrestler, or what is it? Why do you want to be a wrestler? And there was actually one thing that I could pinpoint that was like, yeah, that's what it is. There's a little, I don't remember the link or what site it was on, but it was a Randy Orton interview situation for WWE where they had this like super cute little, I want to say 12-year-old kid, and they were interviewing the kid. They were interviewing the 12-year-old and asking him about his favorite wrestler, and obviously his favorite wrestler was Randy Orton. And he starts talking about his RKO finisher, and he was like, oh, I totally know how to like get out of that. He was like, it's so obvious. And this little 12-year-old kid. And little did he know, Randy Orton was backstage behind the curtains listening to the whole thing. And so they keep him talking long enough about, oh, well, how would you get out of it? And then Randy kind of like creeps in behind the curtains, comes up and puts him in it. And he's like, so how are you going to get out of it? And the kid like instantly freaks out because he's got his like man's arm around his neck, and then he looks up and he sees it, and he's not scared. He's like, oh my gosh, it's you. And he like just gives him this big hug, and it was just kind of like that moment that was like, shoot, you kind of want to create those moments with people. I thought it was really heartwarming.
So now I know that Dustin brought in some other people to help train you guys, like Rebel and Red Velvet. How was that working with them too?
We actually didn't get to meet Red Velvet. I know that Red Velvet's one of his really like close students. I would love to meet her one day. That'd be awesome. But I did get to meet Rebel. She she reffed our match. She was a really sweet person to work with, and she was very she was also really insightful. It was cool to see like her take on a bunch of different things from like the TV element. She helped out one of our girls just to be like, hey, you got to get this attitude going. Like she kind of helped fire us up a little bit. And then she was a great ref. I mean, still think she screwed me out of a win, but we'll see if anything comes out of that. I don't hold it against her.
Well, throwing it back to the powerlifting, you mentioned that you hold some records. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Unfortunately, it is past tense now. It was
Oh,
held.
okay.
I don't know if it's all of them that are past tense, but in the state, well, actually in all states, it was a USPA, United States Powerlifting Association, that I lifted with, and for each state, they have individual state records, and each individual state has their weight classes for both men and women, but they also have weight classes for a couple age groups. So when I say I held records, I did hold some records, but they were niche. For my age group, I was a junior at the time, so I was 22, between the ages of 20 and 23. Within that age group, I was in the 165 weight class. And within that weight class, I held the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, and the overall total records. My squat, which they've all gone up since then, I just want to say, since I'm still getting older and stronger. But my junior records, it was like 330 something for the squat. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. Squat was 347.2 pounds. Bench was 203.9 pounds, and my deadlift was 413.37.
Wow.
For a 953.5 overall total.
So do you know what your current maxes are?
I do. And I actually kind of tested them all at the tail end of last year because, again, COVID, and we got bored. Squat, I ended up maxing at 385. Probably could have gotten close to the 400 mark, but my elbows were shot from wrestling and the weightlifting training. And then my actual bench, I maxed out at 250. And then my deadlift, I went and randomly maxed out at like 435 or something.
Wow.
Just like, and they were all spur of the moment situations too, where it's like, you know what, everything just feels good right now. Let's try it. And it was good. So it's not exactly the same as a meet situation, but I don't compete anymore, so I don't care.
So now you mentioned that Dustin's Academy was a 12-week-long camp. So what are you planning on doing now that that's over?
So we graduated at the very end of, what month is it now? April? We graduated the very tail end of last month. And I've since just taken kind of like 2 weeks off because for me, that was like a very busy just schedule. I was working in that. And I hadn't had any like downtime to just have some nights with family and friends, and so I'm just taking a couple weeks off. Right now, I'm looking to get back into training again. Probably gonna go check back out my other school that I was at before, or see what happens if I get invited to go train at other places or if I get bookings. I've had some people reach out for some stuff in like the next couple months, but I have to get actual ring gear first before I can do that. So actually finally got my ring gear design finalized. So we're looking on getting that in motion, and that'll be cool.
Yeah.
So we'll get some photos then hopefully of that. And yeah, I still say, man, you got to teach me how to tweet because apparently Twitter is where all the wrestlers like to hang out, and I have no idea how to use it.
Twitter is where it's at for wrestling. That's where the epicenter is.
All I know is how to like very mildly use Instagram. It took a while for me to even build my own personal base there.
You were saying that Dustin did train at the same time as he was on AEW. Were there any interesting stories of when he would come back, either injured, sore, anything like that?
Oh, Dustin. He would come back every now and then, and he would just like... Sometimes he would take like a bump or two just like per class, and he's like, that's all I'm doing. I already worked this week. You guys take the bumps. And we're like, okay. I'm sincerely hoping he won't be mad that I like tell a story, but probably one of my favorite ones was absolutely not even wrestling related, but during the ice apocalypse that Texas had, Dustin drives a big truck. Oh man, gotta have a big truck. And so he drives a big truck, and I don't know what it's called, but like the steps that you use to get into it had frozen over and he slipped off of one and fell and took a bump right on the ice. But he was like, yeah, that was one of the worst ones ever. Like, hit his butt real hard. And so it was just fun for like the next week or two with training with him, because every time he'd hit the rope, he was like, oh my. And he had us dying in tears, like laughing so many times. It was great.
So now, someone that I believe you would have trained with was on AEW Dark last night, Shauna Reed. Did you have a chance to watch that match?
I absolutely did watch that match last night. That was a real cool moment. I remember like a couple days ago, we got a group message from one of our other classmates saying, well, who could that possibly be in the crowd? And it was a little screen grab of, I guess, one of the film things, and it was Shauna, like, in her civilian clothes, but it was like we recognized her, and so we knew something was coming up. So as soon as that little moniker came out, the card for her and Dr. Britt Baker, it was like, oh snap, here we go. And I'm kind of like, I wish that they'd gotten into it a little bit more, but since it was just a dark match, they didn't delve into it. But during our time with Shauna, she told us about how one of her like very first matches ever, she's from I believe Cincinnati, one of her first matches ever was with Britt Baker, like when it was early Britt Baker too. I was like, that would be so cool if they had brought in some of the like, well, we meet again, like personal history type stuff, but I guess it was too niche.
So now the last thing I'm going to ask is, if there's one thing of wisdom that Dustin taught you that you can take away, what would be that one piece?
Dustin is a really good talker. Dustin is a really good... Honestly, I walked away with that feeling like I had a new father figure. He is such a dad. He has keep stepping everywhere. He has it on his wall. He has it on the skirt for the ring. It's everywhere. And he really does kind of live by that, where it's like, even when you fall down or you have a setback or something bad happens and you feel like you just can't move on, just keep going. Just keep working. Just keep putting in that time and that effort, and it's going to pay off, because you're going to progress. You're going to come through whatever blockade it is that's keeping you from what your goals are. And as long as you just keep putting in that work, you'll get there. So that was something, especially since like holidays are always kind of just like rough for me. And so we started and it was coming right out of the holidays. And so it took me a minute to kind of like get into a good stride. And so I do feel like if you just keep working, it's going to pay off.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Ava, for joining me today on this interview. Make sure you guys head over to her Twitter and Instagram at the Ava Wilde, and for bookings over at avawildwrestling@gmail.com. Anything else you want to plug?
No, just thanks for having me, man. And it was really great to talk about my experience. Everybody go apply at Rhodes Wrestling Academy, see if you can get in and see if you've got what it takes to be the next big star.
Well, thank you for joining us.